Traders, how are you? With Marcello. Today we're doing the recap of what happened in the markets last week. Welcome to $8 gas. The war in Ukraine, unfortunately, is continuing to escalate. And we even have mega massive floods in places like Australia. Let's get started. So that is money, peanut. I am Marcello. Inflation is getting pretty bad. Overall, the markets for the week, the United States, overall, mostly negative. Obviously, the overarching story for the week was the situation in Russia and the sanctions of the West, Europe, and the United States against Russia, which continue to escalate, seems like every week. The Dow is close to correction territory for the first time in 2 years. It's almost at 10% decline from January's high. And then we even had Canada's market up just a little bit, about 0.08%. Overseas markets, the European markets were mostly higher, with Spain being over 5%. Latin American markets were mostly mixed. Less than 1%, all of them. And then in the Middle East, we had Egypt taking a big hit at 8.14%. We already have riots. I believe it was in one of the countries in the Middle East. I believe it was Iran. No, not Iran. I believe it was Iraq. One of the things that is starting to happen now is, remember that we talked about last week about the significance of Ukraine and Russia in food production, not only wheat, corn, but also things like fertilizer, which obviously affects the whole world because we need fertilizer to grow food. And so Middle East is one of the places where they rely on most of their purchases for food from Ukraine and Russia. So obviously that's going to pop off sooner than later. Other than that, we have a situation in the Far East, which is Australia and Asia, mostly mixed this week, with the Hang Seng in Hong Kong going down 6.7%. Most of the others were down 2-3 or up 2-3%. And then we also have Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, huge. We got huge news. It's huge. We have an executive order from President Biden. And this is what I always talked about from the beginning, for most of you guys that have followed me for quite a while before they just took down the previous DTA channel when I did all these videos. But there was an executive order that was signed to, quote unquote, investigate the benefits and the risks of a digital dollar. Government coin is coming. Even Robert Kiyosaki, if you guys know the famous book that he did called Rich Dad, Poor Dad, super smart guy, great investor, super rich. He talked about how the government is going to seize Bitcoin and other cryptos and roll it into the government coin. So that's going to be really interesting overall. And one of the things I see happening right now in Bitcoin as well, you guys know I love the idea behind Bitcoin. I'm not one of these fanatics. Obviously if you talk about Bitcoin going down, everybody gets upset. But I think there's something happening right now where I think there could be a situation where Bitcoin can actually get to 100,000 by the end of the year. And the reason why is because I see, I've been in this industry now for almost 22 years, and it kind of seems to me now that they're slamming the price in order for the big boys to get in. And so we'll see what actually happens. But I think that's something that's happening right now, because you can kind of see it in the actual market movement, and then also in the behavior of the way that the market is acting. Other than that, surprisingly, the executive order that Biden passed was supposedly supportive of cryptos. There was a situation where everybody thought, obviously, that they were going to try to regulate it or take it out or ban the mining, for example, like China did. But it seems like they're a little bit more receptive, let's say, to the idea. And that's why I think something different has changed. And I think we have a situation where I think they're pushing it down in order to move it back up. Other than that, Bitcoin was higher this week, up 0.28%, got to just under 39,000. It's still down over 15% for 2022 this year. But as we all know, Bitcoin will move one day, it'll cover that, right? So that's not a big thing for Bitcoin. In commodities, $8 gasoline in California, which is probably what most of us are going to be paying. Here in Colombia, for example, it's about the relative basis, about $2.50, $2.70 a gallon. One of the things that is crazy in my view is that Biden now, instead of producing more in the United States, so we don't have to rely on maniacs like Russia, because remember last week we talked about how we are still paying Russia to import oil in the United States, right? And there's even talking about sanctions on now the actual oil from Russia all the energy products, of which we still pay Russia for, right? So there's going to be even more of a shortage, which means even higher oil prices, right? But obviously during this administration, they blocked the Keystone pipeline where we could have been paying Canada for oil. But no. Let's talk to Iran and Venezuela, two bigger maniacs than Putin, and let's buy their oil so we can pay them too. It sounds crazy to me, but that's actually what's happening. Other than that, gas prices, gas theft is on a rise. A lot of cars in the United States, especially Fords, they don't have the little gas tank cap key thing. So if you don't have one, I would recommend you probably look for one, because the theft for gas is starting to increase right a bit, especially in California. They're actually drilling holes into the gas tanks under the cars to be able to steal the gas to resell it. You guys can see there in the photo. So obviously a gas cap key isn't going to stop them from drilling into your gas tank, but this is going to be a really big problem, and it's going to continue to get worse. Food prices, according to a UN agency, they've reported that food prices have gone up by 20.7% year over year. In January alone, it's gone up by 3.6%. But don't worry. At least the inflation is only 7.9%, right? Don't worry about the food. That doesn't matter. We don't got to eat. We don't got to put the 50% rise of gas even higher now in our cars. No. Inflation is only 7.9%. Thank goodness, right? Whew. We only got to pay a rising prices of 7.9%, even though our food has gone up over 20%. Other than that, and that was sarcasm for you guys listening on the podcast. And somebody told me to always mention, for those of you that are listening on the podcast, look for Marcello Arrambide on YouTube for you guys who want to see the video and all the graphics and everything that we share. And then for those of you that want to listen instead of watch the YouTube video, just look for Day Trading Academy, and that'll come up anywhere you listen to the podcast. Oil prices soared in Asia on Monday as high as 18%. According to the IMF, Russia sells about 1/3 of its exports to the EU and about 5% to the United States. So now that they're sanctioning absolutely everything except for the energy, no, I still pay them for the oil. It's about 30% of their economy. Visa, MasterCard, American Express, McDonald's, and even companies like PayPal and the big energy companies, Shell, BP, and even ExxonMobil are all exiting the Russian market and blocking even Russian customers. Coinbase even said that they were going to go ahead and block some of the Russian customers on their system as well. And then even a company like BP said that they're going to be losing up to $25 billion because of the exit. Now, what's this going to create is, this is not good, because what's actually happening is Russia now is going to rely more on China. They're even going to use their union pay system. And there's a really interesting piece of news this week where Russia, as of the 11th of March, which was yesterday, Friday of this week, 11th of March, they disconnected themselves from the global internet. So remember we talked about those blackouts? Coincidence, no? Other than that, the U.S. Energy Information Administration projects that U.S. liquefied natural gas exports are going to account for roughly 22% of the entire world demand by 2023. This is due to the fact that people now are going to stop relying so much on Russia and start relying more on the United States, because, as I mentioned, we could produce as much as we want. During the last president, we actually had an exportation business of oil. So we actually produced so much oil, we were exporting it. If you guys didn't know, the United States is actually the biggest producer of oil in the world. We just consume a lot of it nationally. And so that's actually pretty interesting. Even liquefied natural gas, we produce an absolute ton of it. And they say that some analysts from Goldman Sachs, which is the most important financial company bank institution in the United States, said that the United States is going to become the biggest producer of liquefied natural gas in the world, topping both Australia and Qatar as well. So much for the environment, I guess. Crude in the US went down 5.8%. Brent got down to 4.82%, even though international oil, which is Brent, went up to $130 this week. London Metals Exchange suspended the trading for nickel this week due to the fact that it spiked 250% in 2 days. If you don't know, the exchanges, anything from the futures exchange for physical things like oil and silver and gold, or even stocks, they actually have a limit up and limit down. And what that basically means is if it goes down by a certain percent, they'll cut it off so people will stop trading, and supposedly cooler heads will prevail. And so that actually hit the limit up in nickel, and there was billion-dollar losses from a tycoon in China, in addition to $1 billion. One of the biggest banks in China as well took huge losses because they were actually shorting the nickel market. Precious metals overall higher for the week. Gold went up 0.96% to 1,992, while silver went up 0.85% to 2,605. We're definitely going to have a lot of a lot of gas on that upside when it comes to gold and silver, especially if we see a lot more uncertainty. Financial and banking news: HSBC, which is the 7th largest bank in Europe, the largest in the UK, went down by over 7% after the financial fallout from Russia, because they're taking a big hit. And the CPI rose 7.9% in February, which means that we now have the highest increase in prices for over 40 years. And if we had the old calculation, it would actually be about 15%. Now remember, just because the food goes up by 20.7% year over year, that doesn't mean that the costs go up actual 20%. It's only 7%, like the government says. See the hypocrisy behind that? The Russian attack on Ukraine also, they're stating that it may slow the global growth and raise new economic risks. The ECB, which is the European Central Bank, is talking about removing the bond purchases that they have in September. That's going to go ahead and open the door to increase interest rates. And what's going to actually happen now is, as the economy actually becomes weaker due to this whole sanction situation, right? Because energy prices are exploding, we have a situation where the interest rates are going to start to increase. So the central banks of the world are going to put gasoline on the fire, because as the economy continues to get worse, they're going to make it worse by increasing rates. Now, if you don't know, what happens is increasing rates basically limits the liquidity, let's call it, in the economy. Less people get mortgages, less people buy houses, less people buy cars, less people go out and buy things, because obviously with the double whammy of inflation and then interest rates going up, it's a really bad problem. So prepare yourself. The preppers were right. Store your food, store your ammo. The zombies are coming. German inflation accelerated in February. They went up 5.5% year over year. One of the things that's really interesting as well that you guys have to understand is that we're seeing the inflation across the world. And the reason why we're seeing it that way is because the whole world uses dollars. The United States is still the preeminent economy and also global reserve currency. So even though it's changing very rapidly, it's a situation where the US is actually exporting inflation all over the world. So it's not the president that you have at the moment in your country. It's literally the US sending it to you, right? And the irony behind it as well. And if you guys want me to do a video, for example, if we spent the same amount of money or even more money in the last president, right, the last administration, we have to be apolitical, right? It doesn't matter if it's left or right. I never try to get political with these videos, but there's a reason why in the last administration, we didn't see this explosion in situation with inflation. It has to do with the economy. So let me know if you guys want me to do that video. Applications in the unemployment insurance in the United States went up higher than expected. It went by 10,000 to 227,000, and continuing claims also went down just a little bit. It looks like here went down by just about 5,000 or so. It went from 1.45 million to 1.4, excuse me, it went up. I said that backwards. It went up by about 44 million. So even some precursors also that we're seeing that the economy may not, the fissures are starting to show, let's say. The UK Office of National Statistics on Friday said that the economy grew 0.8% month over month in January, even though they contracted 0.2% in December. And they're obviously expecting a situation where they're not expecting as much growth because of the situation with the sanctions and also the inflation, which they are expected to raise rates. Remember that the consumer spending is always the most important number in any economy, any industrialized economy, which is the majority of the world outside of maybe the majority of Africa and then a handful of countries in Asia. But if the interest rates go up and you don't have that extra money to go and spend at the store anymore because you have to put gas in your car and you have to buy food that goes up by 20, 30, 40% a year, then you're not going to have extra money to go and buy a restaurant or buy other things, a vacation, right? And that's going to affect the economy because almost 70% of the economy in the United States is consumer spending. So if that goes down, that brings down everything. And then we have a global economic recession. Corporate news: Toyota, the world's largest car maker, fell by 6.5% in Japan, 5.74% in the US after they admitted that their majority-owned commercial vehicle unit manipulated emissions and fuel economy. Aren't they known as the best fuel economy cars in the world? Shares of Etsy went down over 11% to $121 on Friday after they had an investment downgrade by Deutsche Bank. The stock is down over 44% in 2022. And then on Monday, US shares of a lot of the airline companies went down because of the situation with gasoline and oil. Since we've had such a huge rise in the price of oil, obviously that raises ticket prices because it's the second biggest expense for airliners after labor. And obviously higher prices means fewer passengers, worse economy. People don't have as much money to travel anymore, especially now since we were just getting out of the pandemic. Alphabet's Google unit on Tuesday said they were going to buy the cybersecurity firm Mandiant for $5.4 billion, all cash deal. They said that they're going to close the deal later this year, and it's going to boost the cybersecurity of their very popular Google Cloud business. Amazon announced a 20-to-1 stock split for the first time since the dot-com bubble. They went up 10% after falling back about 6%. And they also announced that they approved a $10 billion purchasing. They're going to go ahead and buy their own shares. And they're even got unequivocal, unconditional antitrust approval from the EU for $8.5 billion for the purchase of the U.S. movie studio. For the U.S. movie studio MGM. So now they're going to be able to better compete with companies like Netflix and Disney. He wants to be spoiled. For those of you guys that are listening, I have my little dog Money here, and he's just a little spoiled. He wants to come and be with daddy. Other than that, European steel makers, I thought this was really interesting. Steel makers in Europe, obviously steel, they have to melt it. They have to use, a lot of energy when it comes to the welders. They are cutting back their operations or shutting down operations because they can't afford to pay for the power prices surge. So there's a situation now where we're going to run out of steel even, right? And nickel, remember, nickel went up 250%. Nickel is the main ingredient in those lovely electric batteries that we love in the electric vehicles, right? And also the stainless steel has a lot of nickel in it as well. So you can see everything is just exploding, right? It's going to hit us all at once eventually. Trade news, Russia is announcing an export ban on 200 products ranging from agriculture, machinery to telecoms and turbines. They're not going to limit the sales energy and raw materials because obviously that's where they get their money from. You see how this is all just political, right? Well, we're going to ban, we're not going to sell that, but you can still give us the money for oil because we obviously need that to survive and pay for the war in Ukraine. You see how it is? And also in technology, Samsung stated on Monday that hackers breached the internal company data, gaining access to the source code of a lot of the Galaxy branded devices. And there was a Telegram group from a hacking group called Lapsus that claimed that they got 190 gigabytes of confidential code. And Paris Hilton, which is the daughter of the hotel billionaire that started the Hilton brand, and the billionaire Jurassic World producer, raised $75 million to bring back woolly mammoths. So it looks like they're going to create the real life Jurassic Park. And investment news announced on Friday, the regulators in the EU and the UK have opened up an antitrust probe in both Google and Meta over the tech giant's 2018 ad deal. Between the both of them, they're over 90% of the online advertising market. And then on Monday, it was reported also that Russia was telling Ukraine that they will immediately halt all military operations if they recognize Crimea and then also Luhansk and Donetsk as independent regions that are not part of Ukraine. And in addition to that, modify the constitution in Ukraine to never join the European Union and NATO, which obviously they denied. So now there's a bit of an escalation where they see a lot of the Russian military kind of amassing troops to be able to go ahead and take Kiev, which is the capital of Ukraine. On Friday, more cities in Ukraine targeted by Russian airstrikes. So that's going to continue to escalate. I hope you're getting ready. The situation with the food shortages are probably going to hit really hard in 2023 and 2024. A lot of the grains and things like corn that we use is actually stored. So what's going to happen is as we continue to burn the storage and more countries continue to ban the export of their food, then that's going to cause a problem because the new crops aren't continuing to replenish the storage that we already have. The preppers were right. The zombies are coming. Don't forget to leave the like. See you next week.